So I'm going to announce the winner of the debate, Joe Lhota. but it's really more important than that. I think what Joe did was not just win the debate. I think Joe demonstrated why he should be the next mayor of New York City. On every issue, he is extremely knowledgeable. He understands the city of New York probably better than anyone that I can think of. He is prepared to be mayor tomorrow. The debate is clear. He's the best prepared of all the candidates, Republican, Democrat, Independent, to be mayor of New York City. He has not only government experience and the very best, but he also has significant experience in the private sector. He's a perfect combination of what we're looking for. Not a career politician, like many of the Democrats who've been in politics all their lives, and basically I think that's a liability. He's not just been in business, he's been in both. He's been successful in business, he's been successful in government. He's had to deal with one of the worst crises this city ever faced. And I'm talking about the economic crisis in 1994 and the crime crisis. And then an even worse crisis, September 11th. He's handled it all about as well as he possibly could. And he demonstrated during this debate why he's prepared to be mayor of New York City. I urge every Republican on Tuesday to vote for him. And then once that's over, we'll start to think about the rest of the election, which of course is the most important.
But Mayor, if the polls are correct, Bill de Blasio is way out in front for the Democrats. Is that the most favorable matchup for Joe Lhota?
Oh my goodness, I think Joe handled that perfectly. You don't get to pick your opponent. Joe will be a very strong candidate against any one of them. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, just like Joe has strengths and weaknesses, John does, I do. I mean,
But you, as an expert analyst, wouldn't you have sat down to yourself a couple weeks ago and said, "Oh, you got to go up against de Blasio. That's the best matchup."
I taught myself as a person that's run for office never to think too much about who your opponent's going to be until it actually happens. I think Joe handled the debate perfectly today. What he did was he demonstrated to all the people of New York why he's the best prepared to be mayor of New York City. There's no one that could have commanded those issues the way Joe did, whether you're talking about transportation, crime, race, whatever. I mean, Joe understands it inside out. He has a record of success in everything he's done. This is the kind of person we need for mayor, a real leader.
Mayor, what do you think of Councilman Tito's talking about 9/11, specifically about the positioning of the emergency center, and then separately he kind of slagged off on you personally and said there's a bunch of people who used to work for you that want to now work for Joe and make a bunch of money.
Well, September 11 is, in my view, almost something you don't talk about politically. It's sacred, but the reality is there were things that were done right on September 11 and things done wrong on September 11. There's never been an emergency of that level, if we ever had an emergency of that level, where there aren't things done wrong and right. Overall, however, as the 9/11 Commission noted, 99% of what was done on September 11 was done correctly, and that was exceptional under the circumstances. The men and women who operated on September 11, the choices that were made, the relocation to a new command center within 20 minutes, which Joe facilitated, something they didn't get into, all the preparation that was done with Y2K to make the city virtual, so that it almost didn't matter where our command center was. The command center could have been here. The command center could have been in northern Bronx. Within 20 minutes, you could recreate the command center anywhere. Why? Because Joe Lhota led the effort in 2000 during Y2K to make all of New York City systems virtual. That means you could set them up anywhere within 20 minutes. So a lot of that debate was somewhat irrelevant. Look, Joe knows the inside of New York government. Most people don't.
What is your take on the stop and frisk debate that's been raging through this mayoral election?
Well, I like John Catsimatidis and Joe Lhota and some others believe that the stop, question, and frisk application by the New York City Police Department is one, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why crime has remained so low in New York City. I believe the New York City Police Department, the overwhelming majority of times, operates constitutionally in the way they do it. I think individual cases of unconstitutionality should be dealt with that way, but not in the general broad way the judge is doing. And I also look to New York and Chicago. Chicago has somewhere between 3 and 3.5 times the murder per capita of New York. Yeah, virtually the same kind of people, same demographics, and same kind of city. We have the same gun control laws, exactly. So how is it that Chicago has 3 to 3.5 times the murders in New York? If we were standing in Chicago right now, there's a 3 to 3.5 times greater chance we'd be killed than in New York. Because our police department has been more proactive. Our police department starting with Bill Bratton and now under Ray Kelly, has been much more proactive in protecting, and to a large extent, mostly minority citizens, right? Because unfortunately, that's where the crime is occurring. And that's unfortunate, and there are a whole host of reasons for that, a lot of which are blamed on society, and they should be. But the reality is, if you want to save lives, you got to be tough, and you got to be very, very logical. And I think the judge's decision is illogical, and I agree with Mayor Bloomberg, it could be very dangerous.
On public safety, I think both Joe and Katsimatidis have said they would keep the hand-shoe agreement as it is currently, and the proactive way that they're putting some mosques and would-be suspected terrorists under surveillance. I'm wondering if that's as important to you in your estimation about how New York City keeps itself safe. I think some of the Democrats have said they would seek to either change it or tweak it somehow.
The evening of September 11th, Joe Lhota stood right there. It's the last press conference of the night. And when I ended that press conference, I said to the people of New York City, I want to make sure that New York City reacts correctly to this. This attack should not be blamed on a group of people, any group of people. It shouldn't be blamed on a religion. It should be blamed on specific people who acted in a vicious, horrible, and terroristic way. And there should be no harm done to our fellow citizens who are Arab, fellow citizens who are Muslims. For 2 weeks, Joe will remember we monitored every hate crime in the city. We monitored even acts, verbal acts. But we found there were some. The police department did a good job of making sure people didn't do that. But largely, we didn't have a bad reaction in New York City. People in New York City do not bear hatred for people as people. They don't bear hatred. The reality is, it's a small group of people that we're dealing with. They do unfortunately organize themselves sometimes in these mosques. And you've got to, the police department has to not be tied by political correctness. Remember, the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993 was organized in a mosque. I believe it was in Union City, New Jersey. The later attacks, for which the blind sheikh went to jail for 100 years, were organized in a mosque, again in New Jersey. So, it is not all mosques. Joe and I have been in many mosques. We've gone to many Muslim services. I've gone with him together. Most of them are wonderful, just like churches, just like synagogues, but there are a few that have to be focused on. They have been the source of some attacks. The police department can't be hamstrung by this kind of silly political correctness. Otherwise, we could have a terrible situation happen. Had we been looking at mosques in 1993, maybe we could have prevented the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. I don't know. So that's what Ray Kelly has to balance. Ray Kelly is a fair man. He's a decent man. He bears no animus to anyone. He's just doing the best he can to try to keep us safe. And boy, that is a very, very hard job. And when you try to overlay on that lots of political correctness, you can make mistakes.
What advice have you given Joe about running for office, running for mayor in New York?
I would tell him what I told you. I said, "You really want to do this, Joe?"
Personally, yeah, that's what he did to me. But here's what he said to me, and he didn't have to say it because he knows me so well. Always tell the truth. Always be passionate about the city of New York and the people of the city of New York, and never lose your integrity. That's the word of advice that Rudy Giuliani gave to me. It's a code that he followed when he was mayor, and he's followed it in his entire life. He's been a friend, he's been a supporter, I've loved working with him, and I cherish the fact that he's an advisor.
What do you say to some people who suggest that he will be more helpful to you between now and Tuesday, and then perhaps between Tuesday and November?
You know, people prognosticate. You know, one thing I can tell you, conventional wisdom has not been right once in this entire campaign season. It's not been right in the past, it won't be right in the future. People say a lot of things. I think they make it up and then they believe it's true.
If it was for conventional wisdom, I never would have been the mayor. But you know how I got elected? I got elected on the following campaign slogan: I can't do any worse. Things were so bad, they elected even me, and somehow it worked out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reality is it's a different time, it's a different place. We've had 20 years now, not just of me, but of Mayor Bloomberg. We've had 20 years of mayors that have not come from democratic political machines. Mayor Bloomberg and I are different in a lot of respects, we're the same in a lot of respects, but the way in which we were different is we were independent of the democratic political machine. We've got a lot of Democrats, independents, and a lot of Republicans to vote for us. I think New York City has had independent professional government now for 20 years, and Joe is the guy who can continue that kind of government. The others can't.
So how much will we see of you between now and November?
Well, I mean, some, not a lot. I mean, whatever Joe wants, whatever he needs, whenever I can be helpful, and if he wants me to support somebody else, I'll support somebody else. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.